Let me take you to a courtroom where the man in the defendant's seat wasn't just fighting for his name. He was hunting the truth. The press called him a traitor, the police laughed behind their badges, and the prosecutor? He thought this would be the easiest conviction of his career. But what none of them knew was that the man they had chained was the one holding the match. And when the fire started, it wouldn't just expose their crimes, it would burn the system down. Ready? Good. Let's begin. 7:45 a.m. A crisp autumn wind swept across the stone facade of the U.S. District Court, Harbor Division. The morning sun cast long, silvery shadows, but nothing dimmed the gleam of the media lenses waiting like vultures at the gate. Behind barricades, the crowd pressed forward, shouting, filming, anticipating a public takedown. Live streams blinked online. On every screen, "The People versus Elijah Warren" hashtags flared. Elijah exposed, data traitor. Ugh. Elijah stepped out of a black armored vehicle. No handcuffs, but his freedom felt illusory. His suit was sharp, tie flawless, posture calm, but one hand clenched at his side, tight enough to tremble. He didn't look up. Cameras captured everything. From the mob. Traitor? Put him away for life? Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Detective Clay Whitmore lounged like he owned the place, a smug smirk playing beneath his perfectly trimmed beard. He leaned back, hands laced behind his head, glancing at Elijah like a lion eyeing dinner. Sergeant Leo Darnell sat nearby, thumbing the edge of the prosecution table, leaned close to Clay and murmured, "He's done. No way out this time." At the front, Ada Trent Mallory took center stage like a polished performer. His voice projected with rehearsed gravitas, delivering a venom-laced indictment in rhythms that echoed through the chamber. Every word was theater, every gesture a performance. The jury hung on his every sentence, not because of justice, but because of spectacle. Judge Raymond Keegan presided, face unreadable. But as the hearing unfolded, his eyes flicked toward Elijah, and for a brief second something flickered. Doubt? Concern? Elijah stood still, stone-faced, through the full reading of charges. Not a word, not a twitch. When Mallory finally paused and the room tensed for sentencing, Elijah rose. Calm, deliberate. "Before this ends," he said softly, "I have a question for the ones celebrating." The courtroom stilled, a beat skipped in the air, phones lowered, laughter faded, even Mallory blinked. Clay rolled his eyes. "He's putting on a show," he muttered. But Elijah didn't blink. The silence felt loaded, like the last breath before a storm. Elijah didn't glance at a single note. He didn't even blink. His eyes locked on three men: Clay Whitmore, Leo Darnell, Trent Mallory. He spoke with a voice so steady it rang louder than any gavel. "Trent Mallory, Lakeview Initiative Fund, 1.3 million wired offshore to a Cayman account under the alias Bluebridge Trust. Leo Darnell, June 9, 2019, Rushford Lake. Witness named M. Ellis disappeared. No body, but there's a recording. Clay Whitmore, 18 cases between 2014 and 2022. All showed altered evidence. I have the originals." A sharp gasp cut the air. Clay's face drained of color, his hand clamped onto the armrest, whitening at the knuckles. He looked ready to explode, but something held him down. Fear, maybe. Or recognition. Darnell shifted, jaw clenched. A bead of sweat slid down the back of his neck. He stopped meeting Elijah's gaze, eyes darting anywhere else. Mallory stood abruptly. "Objection, this is a performance, lies, slan." But even his voice cracked under the pressure. Elijah didn't flinch. He waited for silence. Then, "You're wondering how I know," he said. A pause. The room held its breath. He reached for the button on his suit jacket, slow and deliberate, each movement a statement. No panic, no rage, just certainty. With a calm flick of the wrist, he opened his lapel. The courtroom doors slammed open. Gasps erupted. Armed federal agents poured in, leading them. Naomi Brooks, badge raised. Federal operation. All remained seated. Elijah slipped a polished badge from inside his coat. Elijah Warren, Assistant Director FBI. He turned toward the jury. This trial was yours. Judge Keegan nearly dropped his gavel. Jurors whispered, some outright gaping. Phones rose again, but now no one was jeering. They were capturing history. One woman near the front, once live streaming Elijah's fall, now whispered, "Wait." Online, Zachary Lynn's restream of the badge reveal would hit 45 million views. Elijah turned his eyes back to Mallory, not angry, not triumphant, just inevitable. Naomi Brooks stepped forward, boots echoing on the marble floor like the beat of a war drum. She raised a folder, her badge glinting under the courtroom lights. By the authority of the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, her voice rang clear, slicing through the stunned silence. The courthouse guards froze, caught between duty and disbelief. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Clay Whitmore moved. He half rose from his seat, face flushed, but Naomi shut him down with a glance sharper than a blade. "Sit down, detective. You'll get your turn." The room shifted, lights dimmed, a massive screen flickered on behind the judge's bench. Audio played first, Trent Mallory's voice, unmistakably arrogant. "As long as I'm here, the court belongs to us." Gasps rippled through the room. Next, a grainy clip. Clay Whitmore leaning into a man cornered in a hallway, snarling. "One word and you disappear, just like the last one." The video cut out with a scream. Final blow, a recorded phone call. Darnell's voice. "Yeah, Rushford Lake, clean the scene, no body, no case." It echoed like a confession broadcast to the nation. Silence. Staff along the courtroom walls shifted uncomfortably. A few took discreet steps back, away from the accused. The gallery no longer whispered. They stared. Clay sat frozen, skin pale, his jaw locked. Darnell's hands trembled visibly, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. Mallory bolted toward the aisle, only to be met by two federal agents. They slammed him down in full view, clicked cuffs around his wrists. Cameras caught every frame. Naomi approached the bench, handed Judge Keegan a thick dossier. He looked at her, not with anger, but with fear. Or guilt. His hands shook as he flipped the first page, then the next, and the next. Finally, with a raspy voice, he spoke. "This court is now in recess. A federal investigation is to be launched immediately." Elijah, now seated again, turned slightly toward the reporters, voice calm, eyes unwavering. "Still think this was about me?" The narrative shifted like a tectonic plate. Samantha Coyle appeared on Truthwire Live, no makeup, no script. Her voice trembled with conviction. "I defended this system. I believed it protected us. I was wrong." The screen behind her played slow-motion footage of Elijah walking into the courthouse days before, surrounded by screams, drowned in judgment. Over it, his voice played again, calm and clear. "Before this ends, I have a question for the ones celebrating." Across Harbor City, the people stirred. By noon, Harbor Square was packed. Signs bobbed above heads like waves. Justice begins with one man. Elijah was right. The system lied to us. Teachers stood shoulder to shoulder with veterans. High school students linked arms with retired judges. There were no chants, only a quiet unity that hummed louder than any megaphone. At the Capitol, Naomi Brooks took her seat before the Federal Oversight Council. Her voice was steady, her presentation ruthless. Slide after slide detailed internal case logs, files stamped pending that never moved again. Names like Darnell, Whitmore, Mallory appeared over and over. From 2013 to 2022, Naomi said, the same hands signed off on every denial. This wasn't negligence, it was design. The senators looked pale. America was watching. Back in Harbor, Elijah's face appeared on makeshift posters, not polished or smiling, but candid, honest, real. He declined every interview, no press conferences, no book deals. He simply remained silent. And somehow that silence shouted louder than any podium. News segments no longer framed him as the accused, they called him the witness who wouldn't flinch. His absence became presence, his restraint became revolution. Then came the moment that sealed it. On national TV, a woman in her 50s clutched a photo of her son. Tears rimmed her eyes. "My boy was jailed by those men," she whispered. Elijah stood up, "So my boy could come home." The nation didn't just watch anymore. They stood with him. The morning air inside the courtroom felt different. No jeers, no glares. Just a pulsing collective hush, like the entire building was holding its breath. Elijah Warren walked in, no longer a defendant, no longer watched with suspicion. He wore the same black suit, but this time, it fit like armor. The jury had been excused days before. The verdict today would come from one man. Judge Raymond Keegan sat motionless behind the bench, eyes unreadable, hands folded like a prayer. A long pause. Then, in a voice that had once trembled but now rang firm, Keegan spoke. "All charges against Mr. Warren dismissed, with prejudice." The courtroom erupted. Applause broke through the decorum. Outside, thousands watched on live streams as a city exhaled. Elijah nodded once, not triumphant, grateful. Then came the reckoning. Detective Clay Whitmore stood as his sentence was read. 25 years? Evidence tampering, obstruction, criminal conspiracy? His face, once smug, now cracked, didn't twitch. Just a dull stare like his body had left before the words hit. Next was Leo Darnell. His frame stiffened, trying to hold what dignity remained. 30 years. Witness tampering, second-degree murder. A single muscle in his jaw jumped, but his eyes darted, cornered, afraid. Last was Trent Mallory, once a legal showman, now a hollow suit of shame. 18 years, bribery, perjury, public corruption. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. His shoulders sank under a weight long overdue. Outside, headlines burst across every screen. The system fell in Harbor City. Justice served cold. Truthwire. And viral across the internet, Zachary Lynn's clip played on loop. Elijah's voice over grainy footage. "I didn't beat the system, I reminded it who it serves." 45 million views, one message. As the courtroom emptied, cameras locked on Elijah's face. Still silent, still steady. He stepped through the door, and a sea of signs rose to greet him. Justice begins with one man. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence thundered. The Roosevelt Room of the White House stood still in reverence. Camera shutters clicked, reporters lined the back wall, and across the nation every major network cut in to carry it live. A voice echoed from the podium. "For courage, under fire. For restoring the promise of our Constitution. We present the Presidential Medal of Honor for Justice Restoration to Assistant Director Elijah Warren." Elijah stepped forward, composed in a navy blue suit, a simple black tie, no medals, no rank, just the man who stood when others crumbled. The president placed the medal around his neck, then stepped aside. The room rose in applause. Senators, victims' families, veterans, janitors in the back, all clapping the same rhythm of respect. Elijah approached the podium, the applause fading into a collective silence. His voice was low, almost like he didn't need a microphone. "I didn't come to destroy the system," he said. "I came to remind it. Truth doesn't beg, it stands." That clip would be replayed for months. Back in Harbor City, real change had begun. The Civilian Oversight Board was no longer a demand, it was reality. Composed of public defenders, wrongfully convicted citizens, and retired judges with nothing left to prove, it became the moral compass Harbor had long lost. Elijah declined a salary. "I'll advise," he said, "but the people will lead." Meanwhile, Naomi Brooks took the oath as the director of the Federal Special Investigations Unit. Flashbulbs lit up her sharp uniform, but she didn't smile. Not yet. There was too much to fix. Within 2 days, the COB reopened 1,326 dormant complaints. Files once labeled insufficient evidence, now re-examined under new light. Screens showed families crying, hugging, as long-forgotten cases were finally called by name. Later that week, Elijah exited a closed-door session at the Harbor City Courthouse. His coat blew in the wind as he descended the marble steps. Then came the sound of footsteps, light and rapid. A young black boy, no more than 10, wearing a pressed white shirt and nervous hope, called out, "Did you beat the system, sir?" Elijah turned, knelt slowly, and looked the boy in the eyes. "No, son," he said gently. "I reminded it who it serves." The camera lifted then, past the courthouse steps, past the flags waving strong, until it caught the golden light of sunset sweeping over the dome of Harbor's federal courthouse. The city was quiet again. But it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence that comes after truth speaks. Across the sky, these words appeared in solemn white. When silence breaks, justice speaks. Fade to black, the music swells, the story lingers. Justice at its best isn't loud. It doesn't scream to be heard or beg to be seen. It waits, quietly, patiently, until the lies collapse under their own weight. And when that moment comes, truth doesn't just speak, it echoes. Through courtrooms, through communities, through generations. What you've just witnessed wasn't just about guilt or innocence. It was about reminding a system who it was built to serve, and what happens when the people it swore to protect refuse to stay silent. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think twice about the world we live in, don't let the conversation end here. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your voice, and if you believe more stories like this need to be told, hit that subscribe button and stay with us. Because the next case might be the one that changes everything.